Hello, everybody. I'm going to introduce our final project for the school year, which is the Statistics Olympics. Just know that on Canvas there is a separate tab. I've moved it to the top on the AP Stats modules part, and it's called the Final Project module. Any supporting documents that you need for the project are located there, but what I'll do here in this video is give you just a brief summary of the project overall, break down some of the pieces that are involved, and then give you an example as well. So as you can see here, the project is going to address all of the areas that we've studied, not just through the semester, but throughout the whole school year. And there are going to be 4 parts. The first part is actually what you're going to work on after you're done watching the video. You can work with somebody, you can work alone, doesn't matter to me. But the first part is to design your Olympic event. So when I say design an Olympic event, it can be something that's physical, but it also can be something as simple as how fast can you type in words per minute, or how many states can you think of in 30 seconds, that sort of thing. And just keep in mind that while you are designing your Olympic event, it has to be something that won't take all that long, mostly because multiple events will be happening throughout each class period. So just kind of be reasonable. I'll give you some examples down the road, but just start brainstorming about that. Now, when I say design your Olympic event, you have to think about just generally what's the description of that event, but you also want to think about what are some rules. You want to be consistent from one person to the next, and just think through all the possibilities, the what ifs of what could happen. Once you're done and once you've come up with your event, you're going to just explain to the rest of the class how that event will work. But then it's just a matter of gathering the data. So everybody will then do your event. Depending on how many people are in your class, we might need to do things twice. We might have to find people in the team center, but next step is to gather your data. Third step is to analyze your data, which I will outline in a packet. I'll give you everything you need. As long as you do everything in there, life will be good. And then the final thing is, once you have your analysis done, there's some different things that I'll require of you, but I would just like you to put it into a Google Slides presentation. Kind of a last note is that I want you guys to enjoy the fruits of your labor throughout the year. Make sure that you're picking some sort of event that you're actually that you'd enjoy, or that you think would be fun to spend the next week or so on. Again, doesn't have to be an exceptionally physical one. It's got to be something that's accessible and doable for everyone in the class. But I just want you guys to have some fun with this. Is just give you an example of what the final presentation would look like. Of course, I'm using PowerPoint here, but yours will look very similar in Google Slides. The first part I'll talk about, like the rules and the description, are what I'd like you guys to start working on as soon as you've figured out what your event is. And then from there, we can start to actually do these events in class in the next coming up days. Event title is Cup Stack Attack. It's very similar to probably what you did in elementary gym class. I don't know why you did it in gym class, but you did probably. So here's my event description. I'll say athletes must use a stack of 10 cups to create a pyramid, then take it down into the original stack in the shortest time possible, excuse me. And as you can see, I've got some visuals here. It should be very clear to everybody how this event works. I've also outlined that our materials needed would be the 10 paper cups or plastic cups, as well as a timer. So you want to be equally descriptive. This first slide is just an overall view of what your event is. As we get to later slides, we'll get a little more in depth for the rules. You've got that general event description. The next part is to think about what rules you might need. When it comes to rules, I really would encourage you guys to think about what could happen. So for example, for my rules, I say athletes must stack the pyramid on a table. I want to be consistent from one person to the next, so we're not doing it on the floor, we're not doing it on a chair, it's all going to be on the same table. Also, the original stack must be stacked vertically and be sitting on the table for the time to start. Notice here I've said that if a cup falls from the table, an athlete may restart. That's what I mean by thinking about what could happen. If somebody messes up, does the timer keep going or do you get to start again? That sort of thing. The timer starts as soon as the athlete removes a cup from the stack, and the timer stops when all cups are back in the original vertically stacked position sitting on the table. And times are going to be rounded to the nearest tenth of a second. So this is the level of detail I'd like you guys to consider as you're coming up with your rules. Of all of your rules, the next step in class is that we will actually have everybody do the Olympic event. As I said, it might be more than once, it might be people outside of the class doing it. But then once you have your data, the first part of your presentation is just to present that data. There, we will get into some measurements of spread and of center. So you can see here that I've pretty clearly laid all that information out. These are my mean, median, mode, and so on for the performance times. And notice in the right side, I've got an IQR and outliers. All of that will be outlined in your packet as far as what you need to include here. In your final product is the histogram. You can use other types of graphs, but at least you want to have histogram and then a brief description as far as SOX or shape outlier center spread goes for your histogram. You're going to need in your final project is a box plot. Notice that in the previous slide I already described shape, outlier, center, spread, so that is not needed in your box plot. Your statistical information as well as your graphs, there's a brief section where I'd like you guys to do a data analysis. So for example, one of the questions you have to answer is which is the best measure of center? You just have to explain either the mean, median, or mode, and then maybe reference outliers if that's a reason why you picked one over the other. Another thing is to consider what measure of spread you would what would be most appropriate for your data set. Analysis will be to, of course, find your standard deviation, and that's something your calculator will spit out, but then explain a little bit about what that standard deviation means. So as you can see here, I've identified what the standard deviation definition is. But then I also found out of my data set, I believe I had 50 data values, I found how many or what percentage of those values fell within one standard deviation of our mean. So this again is all going to be outlined in your description and in your packet, but just an example of what you'll need in your final product. Last part here in terms of your number crunching is that you have to find a confidence interval as well as perform a hypothesis test for your performances. So the confidence interval is simply a 95% confidence interval, whether it's for a proportion or for a mean, something we've done many, many times. But what I want to emphasize for the hypothesis test is before you actually conduct your Olympic event, you have to have some hypothesis. So if we're talking about the cup stacking, let's say that I believe the average was going to be 20 seconds. Well, then you have to do a test later on using the actual data to determine if your hypothesis was correct or not. So please make sure that before any of your Olympic events take place, you want to have a hypothesis of some sort of what your final result will be. That way you can actually do the hypothesis test. That you will do in your project and have in your presentation is a medal ceremony. So of course you want to give awards for your top performers in your events. I would prefer that you outline just places 1, 2, and 3, so first, second, and third place. You just have to say who those people were, so list off their names. What was their performance, whether it's a distance or a time or words per minute or whatever the case might be. And then I would like you to find a Z-score for each of those individuals in your top 3. Remember, if your performance is below average, that would be a negative Z-score. And if it is above average, that would be a positive Z-score. So this really summarizes what your final project is going to look like. What I'd like you guys to do is work on the first step, which is to design some Olympic event. So start brainstorming. Again, you can work alone, you can work with other people in the room, doesn't matter to me. But think about what the overall title of your event is going to be. The second thing you want to start doing is open up Google Slides or PowerPoint, doesn't matter to me, and think about what your general description is, as well as what materials you need, and then finally break into the rules. Okay. Make sure that you're also ready to start these events as soon as tomorrow in class. Some of these will take a little bit longer than others, so I want to make sure we have adequate time. So go ahead, get to work. I have examples on Canvas. Feel free to reference those or use those kind of as a template for your work. But let's get our description, our materials, and our rules all set today.